Joining us now, great to welcome a man who has co-written a really interesting book. It's called How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain, The New Science of Transformation. We're joined today by Dr. Andrew Newberg, and he is with the Director of Research at the Myrna Brind Center of Integrative Medicine at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital and Medical College. He joined us on the telephone today. And Doctor, good to have you with us. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me on your program.
Yeah, good to have a chance to talk with you for a few minutes. I had an opportunity to read through the book, and really kind of interesting your research on this. Enlightenment, changing your brain. It's not just, I guess, a psychological thing. It's something physiological that happens, right?
Absolutely. We wanted to look at these incredibly powerful experiences, the most compelling experiences that people can have that change their lives, that change the way they think. And, of course, if it's changing your life and changing the way you think, then it's got to be changing your brain as well. And we wanted to look at how we can put all of that information together to help us understand the nature of these, what arguably are the most important, most powerful experiences that human beings can have, and see if we can help people find strategies and kind of a process by helping them find their own paths towards this kind of experience, their own kind of transformation or enlightenment.
Part of your research involved doing brain scan studies, right? Different people throughout the world. That must have been kind of interesting.
That's been kind of the most fun thing that I've done in my career. We've had this project of studying different practices, different religious and spiritual practices and experiences going on for about 15, 20 years, looking at practices like meditation, prayer, speaking in tongues, Sufis, doing meditation. So, and that was a very important, essential element of this book, which is what's going on in the brain and how do we then relate that to the subjective experiences that people have during these enlightenment states. And that's the other very key piece of this whole book, which is we realize that it's one thing to know what's going on in the brain, but we really have to understand what's happening to the person, what they feel on the inside. So we ran an online survey where we wound up with about 2,000 people who provided narratives and descriptions of themselves and other aspects of who they are. But really the key was the stories, the narratives of these experiences, how they happen, when they happen, what they experience, so that we could put that information together with what we learned from our brain scans. And we're really starting to see a fairly consistent kind of pattern, a core pattern, so to speak, of these experiences and how they affect people and how they affect their brains.
Yeah, you talk about what enlightenment is, I guess, little e and big E, right? Everybody has enlightenment moments where you say, aha, or you maybe understand something, and then I guess the big E is maybe a total life transformation, right? You suddenly understand something you never did before. Does that make sense? Is that accurate? Or?
Absolutely, that's exactly right. And we wanted to talk about the little E experiences, too, because they give people a taste, if you will, of what the big E experiences are. And as you mentioned, those little E experiences, they could be trying to solve some big problem at work or a relationship issue, or maybe you just discover like what your career path should now be. But these are these small aha or eureka moments that certainly change maybe the direction of somebody's life, or certainly shed some light into a particular problem, but they don't change the person to their core. And that's what the big E enlightenment experiences are. These are the experiences that radically shift everything about the person. The beliefs can change, even their religious and spiritual beliefs may change. They may have a change in the way in which they think about life, death, meaning and purpose in life. They may develop some calling in life of something that they need to do. And all of this comes about from this very radical kind of moment where everything that they've ever thought before is rearranged, rewired, and not only is their life rewired, but their brain is rewired as well.
So you talk about the religious transformation. I guess most people think of enlightenment as maybe being a religious thing, although it doesn't have to be. But does something actually, do you know from your research what triggers that? I mean, since it's physiological as well, why that happens at any particular time?
Well, there's two things you mentioned which are very important. So one is that probably about 80% of the people that did our survey were religious or spiritual. About 20% were agnostic or atheist. And so these experiences can happen to everyone. And anyone. I mean, you don't have to be a religious or spiritual person, and you don't have to be a scientist. In fact, you go back a couple hundred years, the Age of Enlightenment talked about enlightenment coming from rational thought and science, not from something religious or spiritual. But ultimately, when we started to look then at how people had these experiences, what were the circumstances around them, we also learned something very important, which is that these experiences can come from a lot of different directions, and they can just come out of the blue. They can be spontaneous experiences, and in fact, one of my favorite ones is the experience that happened to a guy just driving his truck down the road, and suddenly, everything seemed much more vivid, and he saw the interconnectedness of all things, and he had all these emotions welling up inside of him, and that just happened to him. Other people, it happens to them in church or during prayer or during some kind of meditation practice. Some people, it happens during great loss, great suffering, maybe the loss of a spouse or a child, or maybe just hitting rock bottom and thinking that their life is meaningless. So there's a lot of different paths towards enlightenment. We try to distill out for people what those paths are. I mean, obviously, some paths are better to follow than others. I mean, a near-death experience may give you a sense of enlightenment, but you certainly don't want to, encourage people to work towards a near-death experience. So part of what we ultimately kind of look for are a more systematic way of helping people to find a path towards their own enlightenment, and that's what we kind of work on by using this information to help people.
Yeah, and you talk in the book about certain, exercises, if that's the right word, that people can do to exercise that part of the brain. Is that the right way to put it? I mean, you can learn to harness it, I guess?
Well, yes. What we try to look at is, what are the approaches that have worked for people? What are the things that we see as part of these core elements? And so, for example, when we talk about a kind of path or a guide towards enlightenment, some of the steps that people need to think about taking, even off, maybe the first step really is just that ability to kind of open oneself up to this experience, to say, this is something that I want. This is something that I want to strive for. I want to be open. I want to be willing to be able to change. That's a very important first step. And then finding the practices, the rituals that might ultimately be useful for getting the person's brain to kind of rev up, so that when you have that moment of enlightenment where you just kind of give yourself to the experience and you just kind of let it all happen, you really have this very, very powerful experience that happens to you, and at that moment that everything kind of shifts and everything kind of changes. But we give a lot of specific examples of practices that have worked for people in the past. We try to make them in a kind of a non-denominational way, and again, our data show that people from all different traditions and backgrounds can have these experiences. So sometimes it's important to just kind of adapt a process to what works best for you, and that in that sense there's an individualization to this process. But there are these kind of global approaches that we try to provide or show people that can be useful in helping them figure out the best paths for themselves.
And you've been doing this research, you said, for a while. Is it becoming, part of what medicine wants to do? Psychiatry, psychology, in the medical field? Is it growing in interest there?
I believe it is. Sometimes people refer to this field as neurotheology. It's certainly the relationship between our religious and spiritual selves and the human and the body and the brain. We look at even the medical literature. There is an exponential increase in studies looking at spirituality and religion in terms of human health. A large number of studies have looked at the impact of meditation-based practices on our overall health and well-being. And even when you look at brain scan studies, when we did our first study about 15, 20 years ago, there was like one or two other studies. Now there's over 100 studies looking at brain scans and different kinds of practices. So it's been exciting to me to watch the field grow. I think people certainly realize the importance of our spiritual selves in addition to our biological selves in terms of our medical profession and how we help to heal people. And hopefully this, how enlightenment changes your brain is another important step in that direction to get people to a different way of looking at their lives and to try to think about their life in a more positive way and looking at their health. You don't necessarily have to have good health to have enlightenment. Enlightenment is sort of a separate piece that has to do with your attitudes and the ways in which you think about life, the way you think about death, and the way that you think about the world that doesn't necessarily have to match up with what's going on around you. So it's a very powerful experience. And as I said, I think a big take-home point is that it is something that everybody can experience, and hopefully this information between the brain scans and the stories that people tell will be helpful to people in finding their own paths.
Yeah, fascinating topic, fascinating book. Again, How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain is the title. We'll be talking with Dr. Andrew Newberg today. And Doctor, give out a website. Can we get more information on you or the book?
Sure. So my website is Andrew Newberg, NEWBERG.com, and you can look at information on other books as well as research studies. And of course, the book itself can be purchased at a variety of bookstores and certainly online at Amazon or other book retail sellers online.
Great. Doctor, pleasure talking to you. Great job with the research, continued success with it, and hopefully we can talk to you again. Thanks for joining us.
That sounds great. Thank you.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America, isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or Doug Miles.